gas that Assad assured the world he had gotten rid of obviously still exists. So it is a challenging problem set, and we have the right military officers dealing with it.
There's going to be no leap into the air?
Of course not. We'll do our best.
When the surface-to-air defense is engaged, did they become a target, and did U.S. air power or other assets take out those targets?
Yeah, Tora, I'm not aware of any response that we took right now. Again, we'll gather overnight. As you can imagine, we tried to leave the United States Central Command alone here tonight. They were quite busy. We'll, through the night, gather the operational detail, and we'll be back tomorrow morning to provide that.
Yeah, Secretary Matt or Chairman Denver, last year, you changed the force protection levels for the Syrian troops that were U.S. troops that were in Syria. There are 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria. Have you changed force protection levels based on potential responses from Russia?
Yeah, Hans, as you can imagine, the commander always takes prudent measures, especially in the environment that we're in tonight, so they did make adjustments.
Just to be clear on the deconfliction line, you told them that you're going to be operating in airspace, but you didn't tell the Russians what the targets were?
That is absolutely correct. We used the normal deconfliction channels to deconflict the airspace that we were using. We did not coordinate targets or any planning with the Russians.
What was the response, sir?
That information was passed at the operational link from the Combined Air Operations Center in Qatar, so it wasn't on the line. But that kind of information, just to put it in perspective, is passed routinely every day and every night. So they may not have found anything unusual about that particular airspace deconfliction.
Thank you so much, Trina Manson from the Financial Times. Can you talk a little bit about any Iran targets that you initially, Iran-associated targets that you initially considered, and why you may have not gone for them? And could your colleagues explain exactly the sort of contribution that you've made to tonight's operation?
Yeah, again, our allied officers are here out of respect for the fact that they were part of the mission from planning all the way through to the political decision taken. And once their heads of state speak tomorrow, then that'll be the initial statement from those capitals. But as far as any other targets, we looked at targets specifically designed to address the chemical weapons threat that we have seen manifested. The whole world has watched in horror these weapons being used. Those were the only targets that we were examining for prosecution.
Secretary and General Clifford, you mentioned 3 target areas that were struck. How can you be sure that from now on these are all of the target areas or all of the involved production facilities for chemical weapons that the Syrians are using? And do you believe that there are additional locations where they are producing such materials?
That's a great question. We had a number of targets to select from, and again, we did not select those that had a high risk of collateral damage and specifically a high risk of civilian casualties. And so the weaponeering, back to your earlier question, the weaponeering was done, the modeling was done to make sure that we mitigated the risk of any chemicals that were in those facilities and mitigate the risk of civilian casualties. So were there other targets that we looked at? There were. We selected these specific targets both based on the significance to the chemical weapons program as well as the location and layout.
Secretary Mattis, it seems like this strike tonight was pretty limited, not too dissimilar from last year. I know it was three targets this time instead of 1, but it still seems a little bit more targeted and more specific than what I think a lot of people were expecting. Can you walk us through did concern about escalation with Russia affect your decision to keep this more targeted? And moving from there, how much assurance can you give us that this is going to do what the strike last year didn't do, which is basically to stop President Assad from using chemical weapons again?
Nothing is certain in these kinds of matters. However, we used a little over double the number of weapons this year than we used last year. It was done on targets that we believed were selected to hurt the chemical weapons program. We confined it to the chemical weapons type targets. We were not out to expand this. We were very precise and proportionate, but at the same time, it was a heavy strike.
Mr. Secretary, prior to the attack, how important was it to get the support from the allies, not only from an intelligence point of view, but also just from the countries themselves?
It's always important that we act internationally in a unified way over something, especially such an atrocity as this that we've observed going on in Syria. But I would also tell you that these allies, the Americans, the French, the British, we have operated together through thick and thin, through good times and bad. And this is a very, very well integrated team. Wherever we operate, we do so with complete trust in each other, the professionalism, but more than that, the belief that one another will be there when the chips are down. So it's important, and it's a statement about the level of trust between our nations.
Could you just let us know whether the Syrians were able to hide a lot of these chemical weapons in the last several days, since there's been so much talk about a possible strike? Did that give the Syrians time to try to move some of these weapons off limits? And then Secretary Mattis, just to confirm earlier when you were saying you had information about one of the chemicals, but we're all assuming that means chlorine, that you had information confirming chlorine, but not necessarily sarin. If you could just clarify that part.
Yeah, Phil, the first question, I'm not aware of any specific actions that the Syrians took to move chemical weapons in the last couple of days.
Yeah, we're very confident that chlorine was used. We are not ruling out sarin right now. Yeah.
General, I'd like to follow up on Louis' question about the targets that you first examined and then triaged down to the street tonight. It sounds like you went after facilities and not the actual weapons, as indicated earlier, to minimize accidental risk to civilians. In the targets that remain, could you characterize perhaps the ability for Syria to ramp up again and again have chemical weapons?
Yeah, I think it's too early to make that assessment. It's too early to make that assessment right now.
Thank you. General Dunford, did any Russian defenses engage U.S., British, or French ships or missiles? And Secretary Mattis, were any of the strikes tonight intended to kill Bashar al-Assad?
The only reaction that I'm aware of at this time was Syrian surface-to-air missiles. I happen to be down in the National Military Command Center and was aware of that activity. I'm not aware of any Russian activity, and I'm not aware of the full scope of the Syrian regime response at this time. Again, those will be details we'll pull together for you in the morning.
Yeah, the targets tonight, again, were specifically designed to degrade the Syrian war machine's ability to create chemical weapons and to set that back right now. There were no attempts to broaden or expand that target set. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming in this evening. Based on recent experience, we fully expect a significant disinformation campaign over the coming days by those who have aligned themselves with the Assad regime. And in an effort to maintain transparency and accuracy, my Assistant for Public Affairs, Ms. Dana White, and Lieutenant General McKenzie, the Director of the Joint Staff here in Washington, will provide a brief of known details tomorrow morning. We anticipate about 9 o'clock in the same location. But thank you again for coming in this evening, ladies and gentlemen.
And we've just been listening to a live briefing from the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense Jay Mattis and General Joseph Dunford, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, filling us in on the airstrikes, which they say is now over. This wave of airstrikes is over. It lasted about an hour. We do have Seth Jones standing by. Seth, are you hearing any more strikes? We've heard from the Pentagon it should be over.
That's right, Tanya. I've been listening to the Pentagon briefing in my ear and the other ear listening to the airstrikes. Around the time that General Dunford had said that they had stopped, we were not hearing any more. From time to time, we hear some sort of a rumbling in the distance, but no longer those large booms that we were hearing, those very strong, almost sounded like thunderous booms as we were hearing those incoming airstrikes. It has been quite a morning here, though, watching both anti-aircraft fire and flares going through the sky, also hearing those incoming airstrikes. And between that, we've heard cars driving up and down, one in particular playing patriotic music. There is a sense of defiance here. We were meeting with very high level, one minister, other people who are very high level in the government today, and they were saying Syrians have fought through history, have been fighting for this last 7+ year war, and the gentleman in the government, plus he said if there's only one Syrian left, they will fight for Syria to the last drop of blood. So a real sense of defiance even ahead of these strikes here. We were also getting a sense of disbelief for a while as we were on the streets in Damascus. People were telling us that they didn't really believe that the President Trump would follow through with these strikes. It was a very calm day today, but today as Saturday dawns, actually dawn is coming, the light is just coming over the horizon. Now people are waking up with very new questions as to will we see this war escalate? That we will have to wait and see, Tanya.
Well, Seth, we heard General Dunford talk about the 3 main targets of this mission. Could you sense from where you were standing how far away you were from any of those targets?
You could hear that there were targets around Damascus for sure. I mean, Homs is a several-hour drive. That was one of the targets, or one of the military research centers are. You would not be able to hear that, but certainly targets around Damascus. That's what we were hearing in strike. We were also hearing anti-aircraft fire, and we were learning from Syrian state TV that the air defenses for Damascus, where Syria were working on overdrive. Syrian state TV was reporting that 13 missiles in the Kiswa area were shot out of the sky. Obviously, if that proves to be true, there would be some level of pride there for the Syrians who said that their anti-aircraft defenses were working in overdrive. We had heard reports through the week of some moving around of military hardware, and one of the things that had been put in place reportedly were these different air defense systems. Now, the Pentagon, as you heard in the briefing, was very careful to say that these were not civilian targets, that these were, in the words of the U.S. military, very carefully chosen military targets meant to degrade the ability for the Syrian President Assad and his government to develop any sort of chemical weapons. And we're also hearing reports that many of the targets, in particular the air bases and some of the military installations that have been struck, have indeed been evacuated and personnel earlier in the week.
Seth, thank you so much. We will be coming back to you, but right now I want to go to CBS News Radio military analyst Mike Lyons. Mike, thank you so much for sticking with us. We just heard from the Pentagon that this wave of airstrikes is over. Does that mean the mission is over?
I think they're going to look at battle damage assessment. They're going to measure what the Assad government does. I mean, I don't believe they'll go ahead and attack a chemical weapon tomorrow. That would just be crazy for them to do that. But it looks like this attack did get more capability going after facilities and going after places where they're actually still manufacturing some of that foreign gas. And then he's stepping out by command and control headquarters. I'm seeing that's Republican Guard, so that's going to take out some of his ground capability. So I think it's more than last time, and added the British and the French to it. There's no question it's going to evacuate at this time. Yeah, so if you think one of them was an airfield, similar to what we did last time. So we took, kind of one of the military airfields. Second one was that control facility of where they store chemical weapons in the air to start manufacturing. So it's dangerous to deal with these things. And to get into helicopters to handle them, they got to be careful about them. And then that third facility was that storage facility and command and control, and that's those ground Republican Guard units, which I think is kind of going outside of that. And the reason why they struck them is because they knew full well there wouldn't be Russian soldiers there. He said they didn't give a heads up to the Russians.
Yeah, that was interesting. He said that they had been in communication, but there was no advance notification to the Russians.
And that's because that elite unit, what was left of them, of that Syrian military force, wouldn't want Russians around them. That's really how that works. reports of coming from Taliban. If those aircraft clear the Iraqi airspace, for example, that meant sending a message from the Iraqi government to the Iranian government on some level as to whose side they're on, because you have to get permission to do those kinds of things. But this one came from all different directions. I think the last time the attack coming from the Mediterranean, coming from those naval platforms, pretty much in one direction. This one came from a few different directions, which is more of a test to their system. So we're also trying to see what that air defense platform is like. It was just really installed last November there, coming from Russia. And at one point, the previous administration thought that it was so big that we wouldn't be able to do this. We wouldn't be able to take out these kinds of facilities because it's so big.
Last year.
Yeah.
Let's hope his regime gets the message this year.
You have to see, if you look through their eyes, they will not actually say, just take all these risks. They don't know this was double capability, shorthand. And the bottom line is the Russians have come out against the attack.
Right, let's talk about but you did just read a Russian response.
The Russians consider this an aggressive act. Now, they didn't respond rather than they really could have. We'll find out whether or not some of those missiles either knocked some of our cruise missiles out, or it landed someplace, missed some. Then they could have targeted some Navy ship destroyer out there in the Mediterranean, just missed it.
Right. Now we're going to go to Ed O'Keefe for a moment to talk about the congressional response. Ed O'Keefe, are you with us?
I am, Tanya.
So, Ed, what are you hearing from Congress? I mean, we've seen a couple of tweets, one from Senator Bob Casey, saying while Bashar al-Assad must be held accountable for his unlawful use of chemical weapons against civilians, the strikes that are being carried out are being done without a congressional authorization. Are you hearing other lawmakers there complain about this?
Yeah, we've seen a few Democrats certainly raise those concerns, Tanya. We know that congressional leaders were informed tonight by the Vice President formally of the airstrikes. He was calling them from Peru, where only House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has weighed in so far, calling on Congress to pass a fresh war authorization for the president to use to justify these attacks. In a statement, she said in part, and I quote, "One night of airstrikes is not a substitute for a clear, comprehensive, serious strategy," unquote. You mentioned Bob Casey, another Democratic senator, Ken Kane of Virginia, said in a tweet tonight that the president's decision is, quote, "illegal. We need to stop giving presidents a blank check to wage war. Today it's Syria, but what's going to stop him from bombing Iran or North Korea next," unquote. But Kane is working with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker of Tennessee on legislation that would enact a new authorization for the use of military force. On Capitol Hill, they call it an AUMF. Authorizations, and there's some other changes. Kane's a Face the Nation guest on Sunday, and undoubtedly may have a little more detail to share on